So I can't find my fret bender. I haven't used it in years and I've moved a couple of times since then, so who knows. But I've got a refret coming up and the wire I've bought is in straight lengths, so I thought I'd have a go at making one just from bits and pieces I have around the workshop. For the driving wheel, I'm going to try stacking a couple of 1¼ fender washers with a spacer or two in between to give me a gap just over 1mm. That's because this fret wire I have is just under 1mm across its fret tang barbs. For the other two wheels, I'm using some skateboard bearings I had kicking around. And as you can see, I'm just using a scrap of Vic Ash to mount the parts. That offcut I'll use later on as a handle. Unlike most of the simple DIY fret benders I've seen, I want this to be adjustable on the fly, so my idea is to make it as a jig that I can put on my little bench vise. These bolts are M8, skateboard bearings fit them pretty well. They're just a little short to get a nut on underneath, so I tap the hole instead. They're also passivated high tensile bolts, which of course you don't need, but again, I'm just trying to use up leftover nuts and bolts. I tap the holes for the mounting bolts as well, which are 1/4 If the thread pitch is more than, say, 1mm, like both of these taps, and you're going across the grain, hardwood will hold a thread just fine. Obviously, I don't need to torque these up to any huge figure, but if this works out, I might run a little CA glue down them just for good measure. Yeah, well, that works okay, I guess. It's not perfect, but it seems to pull the wire through pretty well. I was a bit worried that this twin fender washer arrangement, this wheel, would actually just sort of slip on the fret tang, but it pulls it through just fine. I was also going to stack up two of these skateboard bearings like that with a washer in between, which creates a little groove there. And I was going to run the fret crown on that groove to help guide the wire. But then I started worrying that if it wasn't all perfectly lined up, that the fret wire would actually twist slightly as it goes through the machine. So I ended up just using a single bearing like that, and it works fine. So I think I'll keep it that way. The problem is, though, I'm not getting a constant radius on the fret wire. So the reason that's happening is because these fender washers are a slightly loose fit on the bolt that I've got running through here. These are designed for 5/16. So I guess their inner diameter is about 9mm or something like that, and the bolt I'm using is an M8 bolt. So they're a little bit sloppy, and there's no way really of keeping them perfectly centered. As soon as I cinch these bolts up, they'll shift slightly. And so what I really have is a very sort of mild cam, actually, and the distance between this wheel and these bearings is actually shifting ever so slightly as I turn it. So with that in mind, I raced out and got some more fender washers from the auto parts store. These ones, though, are made for 1/4" bolts. So their inner diameter is 7.5mm, and across the threads on an M8 bolt is about 7.8mm. So the plan is to just very gently ream that until it's a nice snug fit on an M8 bolt, or even a slight interference fit. That way it can remain really centered on the bolt, and I'll get a nice even radius. Yeah, well, that's worked pretty well. It's given me a good even radius. So yeah, give it a go. I reckon even if you did buy all these bits and pieces, you might have maybe $10 worth of nuts and bolts in there. These skateboard bearings are really cheap. These are left over from another project. I think I bought 10 out of China for like $6 or something. And you don't need fancy bearings. There's very little loading on them, of course. They're really just to guide the wire through. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and tidy this up, give it a sand. I'm going to make a knob for the top of this. So I've got a bit of broomstick there that I think will probably work. Maybe run a bit of fine super glue into these timber threads, put some Danish oil on it, and call it job done. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.